What would it be like to run around and explore the world of Runeterra? How could we enable experiences for players to go explore with their friends?
I hope that in the same way when you see a Disney movie and then you go to Disneyland and getting to actually walk around and explore a space that you know really well feels so magical, I hope that's the kind of experience that we can give to players. That feeling of actually seeing something and then going there in person and wandering around as though it were real.
You know, I've covered Riot games for the past 12 years, and my account is within the first 500 of League of Legends ones ever made. And yet, despite all of this, I am incredibly skeptical that this Riot MMO is ever going to come out. And it's not because of a lack of talent or because I think Riot sucks or anything like that. They make critically acclaimed games that I love to play, but these things take forever to release. All the way back in 2012, I heard about this new game that Riot was making called Project Bacon. I was excited because this was going to be the first new game they made after League of Legends. And many of you have since played this game because it eventually became known as Legends of Runeterra, and it released in April 2020. Think about that. I heard about this in 2012, then it didn't become playable for everyone until 2020. That's an 8-year period of time to make a card game. And it's a really well-crafted card game. It obviously has not found the success that Riot wanted it to, but it took them that long to make something as simple as a card game. And you might say, hey, that's because Riot was in its infancy, right? It was still a couple years out from releasing League of Legends, and there were a lot of people that needed to work on that game. They were constantly growing it, evolving it, and doing all that type of stuff. But let's fast forward 2 years to 2014, which is when Riot started working on Project A. Project A, again, many of you have played, is now called Valorant. It's a really great first-person shooter, and I think they did a fantastic job on it, but that didn't release until also 2020. So a shorter time frame than Bacon or Legends of Runeterra, but still 6 years to make a first-person shooter. First-person shooters, notably, much simpler than a massively multiplayer online role-playing game. Let's jump another 2 years into the future to 2016. And many people don't know this, but Project L, which is Riot's fighting game that is in development, was actually a situation where they did not start that in-house. In fact, they acquired a company called Radiant Entertainment that was working on a fighting game called Rising Thunder. Rising Thunder eventually got canceled and then released as kind of like a freeware thing for people who wanted to mess around with it, but it is the inspiration for what will eventually become Project L, whatever they end up calling it. Now, Project L, much like Project Bacon, the card game, Runeterra, and Valorant, was revealed in 2019 at their 10-year anniversary event. And yet it's still not out yet. And again, 2016 was when they acquired this company that would begin to work on their fighting game, and we're now in 2024. And I would quite frankly be very surprised if Project L releases this year, because we haven't even seen the beta. It is playable if you go to certain events, but like this thing's just not out yet. And I would be surprised if it doesn't come out to next year, which would be 9 years from the time they develop a company that is already making a fighting game to the time when they release a fighting game. And fighting games are just inherently more simple than an MMO. I'm sure it's going to be great. I'm sure it's going to be complex, but we're just not talking about the same thing when we talk about a massively multiplayer online role-playing game. MMOs die in development all the time. In fact, they seem to be the most difficult thing for anybody in this industry to produce. I mean, it is notable that the most popular MMO in the West seems to be still World of Warcraft, which came out about, 20 years ago? And you can even take a look at the Final Fantasy XIV A Realm Reborn situation, where this game is actually really popular, has grown a ton over the past decade, but was called A Realm Reborn because when it initially released, it was such a critical and commercial flop that they had to take the servers down. They did like this in-game event for it, and then literally re-released it as they've rebuilt it from, in some ways, the ground up as this new thing, literally A Realm Reborn. So it's just a really difficult thing to make an MMO. Even the ones that do make it through development and release, oftentimes these games have a really big surge of people all playing it all at once in the beginning, and then those players end up rushing through the content, either becoming disenchanted with the game or getting bored, and then they move on, and the player base just dwindles until sometimes they just end up getting canceled. And it's not as though Riot's MMO seems to be doing really great when you look behind the scenes. I mean, just last year we had Greg Ghostcrawler Street, who was the person who was heading up this whole project and had triumphantly announced it back in 2020, announced that he was going to be leaving the company to go make his own MMO, and then shortly thereafter thereafter, you had another principal designer, Xenogenic, who announced that he was going to be leaving as well. And none of this actually kind of fills me with confidence, whatever you think about it. It's not as if this whole video is just to be Mr. Doom and Gloom, and I'd love to see this game come through. I don't want to shit on Riot, but I do want to try to manage the expectations of fans and even some of the content creators who I have seen say things like, oh, I bet you the beta is going to come out by the end of 2024 or something. This game got announced in 2020, towards the end of it actually. So we are around 3 years out from the initial announcement. And remember, that is less than half the time that Project L has been in development. Just consider that when we're talking about a fighting game versus an MMO, it just feels like this thing is going to be years and years and years away before we actually see anything concrete from it. And by the way, that's not even addressing the major layoffs that Riot had recently as we record this video. So anyway, maybe you think all of this is wrong and you say, hey, look at TFT, it was done in 3 months and they'll do something similar, Travis. Feel free to say that in the comments below, but I just wanted to address this because I see people talk about it in my Twitch chat, I see people talk about it on Reddit, and for me, my answer has always been like, yeah, that thing, which will definitely someday release. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time. I'm not going to promote the link tree in the description where you can support me, because instead I would like to propose a new relationship with you, a parasocial relationship. I'm trying to grow my Instagram because when I go on the dating scene in LA, I have to look hip and famous because that's what LA is all about. So please go follow me on Instagram. There's a link in the description. You're really helping me out. This is not for work, it's just for my personal life. I don't want to die alone. And it's trending in that direction.